wattage.
Okay.
Well, Pete, hang on a minute. I'm saying that, I'm presuming that. It would be nice to know what wattage something like that would use. I'm just presuming it.
Well, it doesn't use that much because it just stirs in intermittently. And then at the end, of course, it heats up to cook the bread. But when it's actually making the bread, it uses very little.
The thing is, and obviously you're building up the heat through the process. You know, you never know, Pete.
It's not actually that hard to make by hand. There are lots of recipes
I haven't
with
bought shop bread for years.
Yeah?
Yep, I don't buy shop bread.
Lovely.
The thing is that Pete's
it smells so fabulous when it's cooking.
It tastes so nice when you're eating it as well.
Yes, this is true too.
As opposed to rubbish they put in shops.
I did have this. There's these there's these loaves that I buy, which are like Hovis loaves, and they're like they're only £1 a loaf, but they're really nice and fluffy and really, I found them in one place, and to be honest with you, there's some of the nicest bread I've ever tasted. But that was
about £4 you can have enough flour to make a dozen loaves.
Well, I'm sure we can get flour cheaper than that, Pete.
Well, probably, yeah.
So I'm just setting this up online and so on. So what we'll start off with is, have we got any news from? You've all got to say yes. You've all got to give me a bit of news because I'm just doing this in the background. So have we got any news from Kate this week?
Oh, bugger!
Oh, come on, Kate. You've got to have something.
I can't think of any. I can't think of anything. I went to Tredegar House the other day.
Oh wow! Did you?
But I didn't actually go inside. It was a date, but it wasn't very good.
Hang on a minute. What type of date was it?
It wasn't very good. I was expecting lunch and a little turn round the house, but not a bit of it. He made a bit of a fuss of getting his card out to buy me a coffee. Although he was talking about lunch when we were coming, when he invited me, and we met at 1. So what girl wouldn't be expecting lunch, eh? But even that aside, no, he was hard work. He had no conversation, really. Really disappointing. Oh, well. But I've been to Tredegar House a few times. It's lovely. I've had a guided tour by a curator too. It's super interesting.
Yeah, but the background to Tredegar House is interesting, to be honest.
Haunted too, they say.
Well, yeah. Well,
and the last, or one of the last family there was into like black magic and stuff. I think like in the 1920s, it was sort of fashionable, wasn't it? To be alternative after the First World War.
Oh yeah, definitely. So the apologies this week from Ruth, who's still in Scotland.
Tune in next week for another tragic installment of my love life. That's all.
Well, hang on a minute.
Sorry.
Hang on a minute. Who's to say that was tragic?
Well, no, it wasn't tragic. It was just a little sad because I was in such a good mood. I didn't care. Do you know what I mean? I just hoped it would be a fun afternoon. And it was nothing of the sort. Nothing of the sort. I wasn't going to pledge to have his firstborn or anything. Actually, at our age, it's sort of a never born, but you know what I mean. Oh, well, fiddly-dee.
Well, I am more or less set them in the background. Yeah, I would like, as you and I are very competitive, Kate. Does that beat the time that because that beat the time I went to Cardiff Bay to meet this woman, right? And she was a librarian, right? And I thought, right, this will be good. You know, there'll be some conversation. Well, there wasn't. And I thought, right, all right. So we went to this restaurant, and it came to the end, and she said, right, I'm paying for my half of the meal. And I thought, right, okay. I wish I'd paid for it, to be honest with you. This is I thought, right, okay, fair enough. So I thought, right, okay, you work out how much, right, it is, and we'll go halves. So I basically went to the washroom, right? And then as I'm coming out, she's having this massive row with the waiter. The waiters refused to give her the receipt because the gentleman booked the meal, so I was to pay for it. And she was calling him a chauvinist pig and all the rest of it, right? And she was having a right row. So Kate, at this point, I was scared, right? So she was kicking off, and I thought, right, let's just wait for her to. And she slammed her money down on the table, called him a chauvinist pig, and stormed out. And so then I basically sat down, and I had something else to eat or drink, and I paid my bit, and I thought, oh, that was a narrow miss. Would you agree, Kate?
Oh, golly. Thankfully, it probably wasn't that narrow. You're probably well safe from that. But I
Yeah,
get it,
exactly.
scary.
Right, Richard. Cool. Richard, any news from you, darling?
No, nothing.
Right, my Barron
All
District
quiet.
thing. Well, it would be. Barry, my Barron District piece wasn't printed last week simply because there was no editorial team in the Barron District News. It had all gone on holiday, and the reporter said, "I'm awfully sorry, Mr. Langford. Don't write anything this week. We'll use the one you did before Christmas." And I thought, right, okay, that's fair enough. So that'll be going in next week. Right. So Peter, anything from you, lovely?
No, nothing from me.
You can't say nothing.
Can't I?
You can't. You can't.
One, make something up.
Yeah, this is what I say in my other classes. If you haven't got any news, make something up. You got a moment. Right. Okay. We are ready to start. Thanks for waiting there. We're going to be looking at. I decided to look at the Barry book this week, and we're gonna go through sections of the Barry book and see what we agree with and what we don't agree with, and what has changed since 1984. So that's what we're doing, and I do believe we've got 4 people watching online. I think so. That's really good. So how many of you have got the wonderful Barry book? My one is a bit sort of a bit knackered, right? But you used to be able to still get the Barry book in W.H. Smith's. So they had a little bit of a stock. I did actually buy another copy online, and that copy online is at the studio, and it's the bigger version. It's the original version. The Barry book was actually printed in 2 versions. Now, I'm not going to speak for somebody else who's with us today, Richard, but I particularly am a bit disappointed with the amount of information in the Barry book. You know, about the pre-Norman period. It's slightly limiting. When in fact, by 1984, we had learned a lot about the Barry area. And what you can say, archaeologically wise and historically wise, in the Barry book, it sort of begins around page 23, and starts with the Normans at page 52 or 53. That's 30 pages of Iron Age, Neolithic, Roman, Bronze Age, Paleolithic, which for me, looking at the Barry book and something that we use as a source of information for the history and archaeology of the area, quite disappointing. There are some nice illustrations in it, which we will look at. So, Kate, have you got a copy of the Barry book there lingering around somewhere in a
I
cupboard?
do, but I don't think I could fish it out at the minute. I do have it upstairs somewhere.
I'm not asking you to fish it out at this minute. I'm just curious to see if you've actually got a copy.
Oh yes, yes, I bought one when I moved here.
Ah, right. Okay. What about you? Yeah, sorry, go on.
I bought it in 97. End of
Oh, God.
97.
Was that from the legendary W.H. Smiths?
Can't recall, actually.
Ah,
No clue.
okay. What
Probably
about
not
you?
online. I wasn't doing that kind of thing then, I don't think.
What in 19 when?
97.
We didn't have online in 97.
No,
It
I
didn't-
wasn't shopping online in 97, I don't think. Oh God, I
No, I
don't know.
just said we didn't have it online in 1997.
There you go.
Right. That was right. What about you, Peter?
I haven't got it now.
What about you, Richard?
Yeah, I got one.
Right.
I don't know
So
what copy it is or anything.
if it's a smaller one, the fatter one, it's the second edition. So
I ain't got
so
a clue looking
basically,
on that.
well, you can go and grab it. Basically,
You
what
got the
we've
Luxton
got.
books.
Thing is, Luxton was massive in the 1980s. I got to be honest with you. Come out with his 3 photograph books, and
That's it.
I don't know.
so anyway, let's just crack on. We've only got until we've only got until 11:45 anyway. But I'd like to say that my frustration with the Barry book is that the archaeological section written by notable local historians and archaeologists, and the first section that we do, it says the foundations of Barry Rocks and Landscape by Gerald Baudet and Kathy Baudet. Well, that starts, we're not doing that today. That starts with page 1, and it goes all the way to page 22 in my view, right? And then what we've got is we've got a staggering interesting illustration which I've referred to, and I've also referred to in the text that we're working on, is this here. This is quite interesting for me, right? And why this is interesting for me, it shows the archaeology that should have been explained a lot more in the Barry book, in this table, right? And what this table is simply a cross section of the archaeology from over 5,000 years ago. And it goes, the remains of submerged land surfaces were discovered in excavations made during the construction of East Barry Dock in 1895. And that illustration was originally described by John Story, and that was in 1895 when he was called out. And that section for me is the first bit in the Barry book that actually talks about real archaeology, right? And it says about the section through the strata has been studied in detail and throws light on the changing relationship between land and sea. For me, I would have done quite a few more pages. The thing is, I think the problem is with the Barry book, this is my view, and I'm going to say it. I believe that the contributors for the Barry book were torn between history and archaeology. And the reason why we got such a small archaeology section in the Barry book explains as follows. Because the contributors are, here we go, Gerald Baudet and Kathy Baudet. Well, historians, archaeologists. Kathy Baudet originally came over and met Gerald Baudet on an excavation in Winchester, an archaeological excavation in Winchester. So they've got a historical and archaeological background. And then Barry began Paleolithic to pre-Norman, is written by Gareth Dowdall, also another local boy, who ended up being the director of the Glamorgan Archaeological Trust. And then the other section goes up to page 101, right, which is all the medieval stuff. There's a lot more. There's about 50 pages of medieval in the Barry book, which is which I think was Howard Thomas saying, right, I know you other bastards, mind my French, want to talk about the history of Barry without the archaeology, right? But I'm going to do my bit. So I think Howard stuck up for the archaeology, and his section is just under 50 pages long: castles, churches, villages, and medieval Barry. And his stuff, which we're not doing today, his stuff was principally based on lots of his archaeological work. And then what we've got historians: Matthew Griffiths, political historians, Yoro Prethero, who I had the pleasure to meet, Yori Prethero, Brian Luxton, naturally a historian, Richard Thomas, not really aware of him, Peter Stead, who's a historian, and they took up with the history of Barry from page 101 beyond 429 all the way through to the end of the book in the index, which sort of goes all the way up to page 479. So in other words, 370 odd pages of history, and under 100 pages of its archaeology, geology, and geography, which I've always been disappointed with. But then again, that's my own personal view. You might disagree. I don't know if Richard wants to agree or disagree with that, then it's fine. But it's my point that whenever you're wanting to research Barry, you're always limited with what you can look at. Anyway, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent. So again, back to this little plan here, and not this lovely little plan. And what we're interested in is these layers down here, right? And so if we can look at that, and we can say the lowest and therefore earliest deposits from the Barry section consist of soil with roots and land shells, and clearly represent an old land surface, nearly 40 feet, 33 meters. That's not right. 40 feet isn't 33 meters. I'm not going into that one. Richard, that's another mistake in the Barry book. Right, there you go. Right. We can have your mathematics on that. What is 40 feet in meters, Pete? 40 feet below present sea level. The Pete
Well, it's
bed,
about 10 meters, something like that, isn't it?
yeah, that's right. So that's completely wrong. So the peat bed above this land surface contains the remains of many logs, including much oak wood. And this surface must have been at all times above high water mark, as even one penetration of salt water would have made the growth of oak impossible. Above this and nearly 30 feet or 9 meters, he's got it right there, of blue clays and silts with 4 distinct layers of peat. So we'll explain what that means. The clays and silt contain fresh water and land shells, while the peat contain the remains of varied plant life. Although submergence had begun, the peat represent the re-establishment of dry land conditions. So that time, what we're talking about in these layers here, this would have been, so we're talking about 5,000 years ago down to about here. So in this period, this is varying between freshwater lake to sort of peat bog marsh areas, and it's sort of moving between. So you've got peat, you've got clays, peat, clays, peat, clays, peat, and you've got this silty layer that then says sea level. Let's see what else it actually says. This for me, I love this section actually. As I say, that I wish they could have made more about this section. Although a submergence had begun, the peats represent the re-establishment of dry land conditions occasionally. The remains of sedges predominate in the high peat beds, sedge grasses, indicate that at this point the land is no longer dry enough for true forest growth. So in other words, the lowest layers, the 40 feet down below, is actually where you have the oak woodland, which is 5,000 years ago. It is the uppermost peat bed, 1.2 meters below sea level, that John Story found 2 bone needles now thought to belong to the Stone Age, Neolithic. Man clearly is moving across the landscape before the final land conflagration emerges, right? So, do you know what I'm going to do? We've been reading that out, right? And I've spotted a mistake. Can you spot the obvious mistake? Anybody? Well, I can, because what it's got there, it's
Where's it
saying
actually taken from, this then? From the
this,
dock? From
this
where
is
they're
taken
digging
from
the...
East. This is taken from East Barry Dock, so that's over towards the Bendrix. What the obvious mistake is with this, right? For me, is that when we start off, it says Barry has some of the best available evidence for the conditions of 5,000 years ago, right? Got it? That reading, that you take that to mean there, 40 feet down. That's what you take it to mean, right? Simple
Yeah.
as that. Yeah, we're happy with that, right? We agree. Is that? Yeah, we agree
Yeah.
with that one. But there's a problem, right? There's a bit of a problem, and what we're going to do is we're going to put something else in there, right? Which I'm going to put in there, right? Which isn't in this book. You see, they should have spent more time. What isn't in it? So what we then do is it is in the uppermost peat bed, right? So if we go back again, which is there, the uppermost peat bed. Well, there we go, right? It doesn't actually tell you that this is the other thing on the plan, right? It doesn't actually tell you that that's 40 meters, 40 feet, that's 20 feet. So that's 60 feet in total. So this is 60 feet down, not 40 feet. There you go, because that's a 0 below sea level, right? So this is actually with the build-up 60 feet down, not 40 feet. So that's not the mistake I'm really interested in, though. What I am interested in is this bit here, right? So this bit here, he's taken this to mean, what did it say? 1.2 meters out there, 1.2 meters, 4 feet here, right? This is what we're looking at, right? So somewhere 4 feet here. This is what 4 feet down, 1.2 meters. This is what we're interested in, right? And he's then describing that in this uppermost layer of peat, right, which is still all told over 20 feet down, but 4 feet below sea level. This isn't made clear. That John Story found 2 bone needles now thought to belong to the Neolithic period. Well, the Neolithic period was 5,000 years ago, told this way and that way. So when we start this section, he's talking about Barry has some of the best available evidence for the conditions in the Neolithic 5,000 years ago. But unfortunately, what he doesn't discuss is the lowest layers, right, where wood is actually found. And what is found there? We're going to see if it's mentioned. It's not mentioned. Because what it then goes on to say, it then goes on to describe what's above that layer, right? So this 4 feet below sea level here is where we're talking about the material being found. This is still, if you want to do the quick maths on this, this is 24 feet below. This is 24 feet below the layer that they're digging into on the East Dock. And for me, when I've made this mistake myself, when I'm writing about Barry, I've like taken this and I thought, right, okay, but I've not questioned this bit. It's actually 60 feet down, not 40 feet, 60 feet down. So when I've described this myself, in 2 things that I've written, I've said 40 feet down. What you then have is this, which is actually where timber was actually found. Because the timber wasn't found in these layers, it was actually found here. right? These lower layers, timber was found, and there's
Was
a
it a-
description of the timbers being found here with cut marks in them.
That's it.
That the trees have been felled. They weren't found here. They were found here. Even by the description, you can't put the timbers up here. You've got to put the timbers down here. Even in the description of Yarrow Burdett, it says there was no trees up here. There was trees down here. So in other words, what we're talking about is that the woodland, the timbers are actually 40 feet below sea level and 60 feet below the level that they are actually digging in the East Barry Dock in 1895. And this is, for me, very frustrating, because I don't know about you, Kate, right? I don't know about you, Peter, and I don't know about you, Richard, right? But having tree stumps with cut marks in them, right? That either they've been felled or somebody's cut into them with an axe. That for me is far more interesting than the Neolithic stuff.
Oh,
because
heck, it is. Oh, it
yeah,
is.
well, it's far older, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a reference which is out of context, right? Richard knows this because I've mentioned this, because there's some reference saying that in amongst the timbers that have been found, there was actually tools. So in other words, Dr. Kate, right? This entire sequence is full of our evidence of our ancestors going all the way back to the Paleolithic period. So in other words, what we can do is, it doesn't really mention the Paleolithic period. It says it happened, right? But where's our Paleolithic stuff before page 22? It's not there, right? For me, that's really frustrating. I'm very frustrated with that. What we do have, it says the peat bed above this land surface contains the remains of many logs, but it doesn't mention the cut marks in them, including much oak wood. It doesn't mention the tools. Where are the tools? I want to know the tools. There's no tools, and I'm really frustrated with that. So then what we've
Where
got,
is that recorded?
that's National Museum of Wales somewhere in some kind of publication, right? I think it's Archaeocambrensis. And actually, what I'm going to do, right? What I'm going to do, I'm going to run to the back here. And that's not Archaeocambrensis. Where's my Archaeocambrensis? Look at these. These are Archaeocambrensis. We've actually got them from the 1800s, right? This is an
Oh, cool.
Archaeocambrensis from 1930, right? And I do believe in the earlier Archaeocambrensis from 1895, 1896. It might be mentioned in one of these, but we haven't got a copy yet. Richard has got access to the online records, right? But the difference between this and the online records is that the online records are not complete. They're not complete at all. You know, you can just open these pages and see wonderful maps in them and so on. Right. This is why I say that actually having a book, actually having proper archives is far better than online stuff. Rich has really struggled
Oh, I
to
do
do research
agree.
online, and he's eventually got the stuff that we've needed, but it's very laborious. And Richard spent hours and hours and hours and hours trying to find stuff. But if you've got actually the copies of Archaeocambrensis, you can just flick through them and get through them quicker. Richard can argue, he can say you're ungrateful little sod, but it's very difficult to get hold of copies of Archaeocambrensis. And I don't think Pauline would be happy having 200 copies in the living room. Am I right about that, Richard? He's gone.
Find somewhere to put them.
What's that, Lovely?
I said I could find somewhere to put them.
I tell you what, if you got any copies, Richard, yeah, what it is, Richard wants to, it's bedtime read for Richard. That's what it is. He's into it. Do you see what I did there? Do you see what I did there, Kate? I've made him lust for these books. Right. Anyway, so what I'd like to do is carry on.
I can't wait to search for them now myself online.
Oh, you'll have competitors, because there's a certain person I know who whips them up. So back to this again. What we want to do, we want to look at the Bronze Age stuff. Now, this is what we're going to do. So what we've got with the Bronze Age stuff, we've got 6 people watching online, which is brilliant. Anyone want to say anything online? This is Barry area generally, but it's sort of overall, you know, you could take this to mean anything. This is research-wise, it is good. So this thick band is topped by a layer of sand and gravel which rests on the surface leveled by the sea. So in the sound going back and forth. So the sounds are starting there, right? And over time, it builds up and it builds up and it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. That sound between Barry Island and mainline Barry. I'm going to make a statement, and I want to see if Pete agrees or disagrees, but we're not going to do that statement yet. So the underlying deposits being estuarine rather than marine in character, right? Estuarine, which is a mixture of fresh water and seawater. Estuarine is sort of that sort of middle area. But that's going to be very destructive. But Pete, I haven't made my point yet, so don't butt in. This layer obviously represents the final incursion of the sea and can be dated probably to close of the Bronze Age. So the Bronze Age, about 4,000 years ago. Evidence from other sources also proves that the relationship between land and sea along the Bristol Channel has not altered substantially in the past. It says 2,000 years. I would say 5,000 years. So, Pete, right? There's a point coming, right? Is it? And don't answer this yet because I've got to give you some more information before you answer this, right? So Pete, keep it to yourself because I could do one more paragraph. Is it possible that the gravel and clays and shingle and so on could have built up to such an extent that the sound between Barry and Barry Island would have eventually diminished so much that there had been a natural land bridge? Don't answer it yet. But what we're going to talk about is this little area here. So this 20 feet here that was actually dug out, the mystery 20 feet of the 60. This 20 feet here is sort of looking at sea level, line of marine erosion, sand and shingle building up, clay with estuarine shells, and sort of the blown sand. This is sort of in that area, right? This is that area. So this is what they're digging into. So at that point, the area they're digging into, it's still at high water mark, going to be flooded, right? So we're talking about overall between Barry and Barry Island. The question for Pete, not answering it yet, Pete, is could that eventually have been completely filled in and a land bridge created? This layer obviously represents the final incursion of Bronze Age. And it goes on to say it is possible to calculate from the evidence of the Barry Dock section a minimum figure for the extent of vertical adjustment that has taken place along the coast, allowing for the depth of the deposits and the maximum height of the tides. A figure of up to 56 feet is not unreasonable, right? For the changes in deposition and silts and all the rest of it, whether it's freshwater or marine. It is not possible to determine if or how far these old land surfaces extended beneath the sea. However, it has been estimated that the total rise in sea level could be as much as 30 meters in this area. Over what time period, it's not saying, but I would probably like to guesstimate over the past 8,000 years or so. This figure coincides remarkably well with the evidence of a recent survey of the approaches to Barry, which suggests a connection between Break Sea Valley system at 30 meters below present sea level and the development of the Bristol Channel. So what we're talking about is that the Bristol Channel has been reclaimed by the sea and so on and so on. So Peter, answer that question. Would the sound between Barry and Barry Island have eventually disappeared? You there, Pete? Is he there?
I would have said yes. There's definitely a land bridge.
Well, but no, could it have been created by now? Could we have seen, eventually, if the Barry Docks hadn't been created, would we eventually have seen, a permanent land bridge between
But thinking of the movement of the water within the Bristol Channel,
Yeah.
almost anything is possible because it would be moving
Yes.
materials around.
Yeah.
And by depositing them between Barry Island and the mainland would be relatively straightforward. And yes, there would be a shingle type land bridge.
And even going further than that, if you think of a natural diversion, because one of the things that we do see about which I always find very unusual, and I've always sort of struggled with this over the past few years. If we look at this, we see the moors at Callaxton, and we see the Callaxton River. It goes all the way past the East Dock, which we've just been talking about, right? And it goes all the way through, right, all the way through here, right? So you can clearly see that this here is what we've been talking about. This is sort of estuarine most of the time. This is where we've got the sample from, this area. So, and actually the other thing as well is I don't exactly know where that sample's from, whether it's from all the way over here or all the way over here, which is a bit of a thing. Anyway, you've got the point I'm trying to make is you've got the Callaxton River coming all the way down here. I've always thought that unusual, right? I've always really felt that unusual. And I've always thought that the Callaxton River would have just gone out to sea here. And the point I'm trying to make, Pete, if you build up shingle and clays in this area, the Callaxton River could have quite easily have gone out here, meaning that Barry Island and Barry would have linked together anyway.
Well, the Callaxton River was definitely rerouted to facilitate the building of the dock.
It was rerouted, yeah, it was rerouted, but naturally, this is what we're talking about. Naturally.
Yeah.
So,
well,
right.
they wouldn't have had to reroute it had it been flowing that way anyway.
Yes.
And looking at where the Callaxton River comes out at the Bendricks, and looking at the rock formations, etc., at the Bendricks, and those dinosaur footprints and things like that.
Yes.
We realised just the height that the water would have been during that time.
All those different changes, Pete.
Yep.
This is what makes our coastline extremely fascinating.
Absolutely.
It really, really does. Yeah. So what we haven't gone too far into this, but what we are going to do is get up to the end of page 28, and then we're going to launch into before Barry began, Paleolithic to pre-Norman, and we're going to sort of look at that section a bit more, right, which has been completely absent in the likes of Gerald Bodette's section. The details of the Barry Dock section and the survey of the bathymetric survey are fascinating in themselves, but more interestingly, for a general survey, they provide the framework for an imaginative reconstruction of the local scene in which man began to exert his influence. A Neolithic visitor, so this is what we're talking to, that layer that we're getting to on this plan, right? That layer, right? That layer, not forget about all this, that layer. So 24 feet down. This is what we're being told. So a Neolithic visitor would have wandered through woods of oak, hazel, hawthorn, and willow on the slopes of the wide valley, which overlooked this point that we're talking about. Not there, would have overlooked it, through which a great river flowed to a much further western shore, probably in the region of Swansea. So now we're talking about the Severn estuary of the River Severn. Perhaps he hunted the red deer, wolf, and ox, auroch, that shared the river valley with him. His Bronze Age descendants would have crossed a land surface of combined marsh and woodland. Now, the Callaxton River that we just mentioned would have flowed westward on its old course to emerge between Coldnap and Friars Point. Again, I've always felt that odd. The extent of its original outfall can be surmised from the seabed survey already mentioned. Barry Island would still have been a peninsula extending westwards from Sully, not fully insulated until the end of the Bronze Age, as represented by the top layer of the Barry Dock section. So what we're talking about, we're talking about that the water is completely inundated that part of the world between Barry Island and Barry by by at least 2,000 years ago, if not before. And finally, only 100 years or so before the arrival of the Romans, our distant ancestor would have looked out on a coastal scene we ourselves would unhesitantly recognize. So, yeah, that's true. But there are natural changes. And it does explain in this section, which we're going to read out, it does explain in this section more about what Peter was talking about, which we'll agree with on this bit. I was very critical. Sorry, Gerald, I was very critical of your section and your plan, but you could have done more with it. During the Mesolithic, occurred the severing of the land connection between the British Isles, which we already know about. We know about all that. So we won't read that bit. The Severn and its tributaries carry vast quantities of suspended materials, which Peter mentioned. It has been estimated that if this material had been evenly distributed on the floor of the Bristol Channel over the past 2,000 years, it would account for a layer of nearly 2.5 meters thick of deposits out in the Bristol Channel. That's why it's good for dredging. But of course, it is not so deposited. Some matter is left at the mouths of the tributary rivers and along the shore where it can build up. And if sealed behind a natural or man-made barrier, which moves it out of reach of the tide, it eventually becomes a land more suited to man's use, i.e. Porthkerry, i.e. Coldnap, i.e. the Wentloog levels at Newport. However, much material remains suspended in the river. So this is, when we look out of the River Severn, it's always cloudy and dark. And my parents used to say the reason why it's cloudy and dark is because there's effluent from the sewage system going out to sea. But it's a bit more obvious than that. It's because it's cloudy because of the clays. And
It's
before
still,
you say it,
yeah.
Before you say it, Kate and Pete, it's because you've got the limestone, which breaks off into such fine fragments that forms the clay. So this is why the water itself is very cloudy. And as you know, Pete, you don't have limestone in Cornwall, do you? This is why the waters are very clear.
Oh, there's mostly granite. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's granite, it is.
Yeah.
Radioactive, but you know.
This is that suspended stuff and can remain in the area for some time, even weeks, before actually being washed out to sea. All those weird currents going back and forth, all the little channels, all the banks, In fact, the current in the Bristol Channel moves fast enough to bring matter in with the tide as well as out. Tide flow studies have demonstrated that some material deposited by man will reappear at a location further up the channel than that at which it was deposited. Thermal radiation data collected from the satellites have confirmed that this restricted deep water interchange. This behavior obviously has impacted for our future on the coast. Fair enough. So this is helping us to sort of understand the harbours and all the later stuff. At Barry, there are several accumulations of alluvium. Yes, we've got to it. The most substantial is to the east and is undoubtedly related to the original course of the Calyxton River, the Sully Moors. That's it, the Sully Moors. So this is all that build-up of crap from the rivers, the Barry Brook, the Calyxton, and so on. And the
annual flooding.
Yeah, exactly. So there it is. We're talking, but here at this minute, Kate, we're actually talking about Sully. Another alluvial deposit is at the Knapp. Yes, we like it. Yeah. On the site of the marine lake, represents a marshy estuary, which has been altered in modern times. Well, in 1920 to 1922, they were starting to have a work scheme all the way up till about 1928, 1929. They were building the promenade and to sort of give those who had come back from the First World War jobs, because all the women had the jobs now instead. The streams which run through Porthkerry Park are responsible for a considerable deposit. Barry Brook flows down Cwm Barry to meet Nant Talog, which runs through Cwm Kiddy and along the foot of Cliffwood. There you go. It in turn is met by Whitelands Brook, the legendary Whitelands Brook, which goes directly underneath the viaduct. The outlet for this combined stream is modern, the original having been blocked by the formation of the Pebble Beach. So in other words, it was just like through all the pebbles, making its way up. These streams and their valley figure in Barry's later history. So in other words, in a way, that explains a little bit more about Porthkerry and the silting up and the deposition in Porthkerry. The South Wales coast provides some dramatic examples of the action of wind-blown sand, all of which has accumulated in the last 2,000 years. So in those areas that we've just mentioned, the Nap, we mentioned Porthkerry, we mentioned Sully, it's all been built up. Two distinct layers can be identified most readily on Barry Island. The first, a half a metre thick layer, which probably began to accumulate late in prehistoric times. And what is that layer? Well, that layer, it doesn't actually say. That layer is sand.
For the last 50 to 60
Oh, yes,
years,
it does say sand, yeah.
they've
Go
been
on.
taking sand out of the estuary at a rate of something like 600 tons a day
My goodness.
to facilitate building in England and other areas. And consequently, a lot of the sandbanks, which were visible when I first went out fishing in the channel, have now gone. And that has to alter the movement of the seabed, if you like.
Mm.
Can I ask you, no, carry on, Pete.
Well, that's Bowles' sand boats. They're sucking up the sand and taking it away and putting it ashore for building. And by taking away so much sand, they've altered the movement of the currents within the channel.
Mm.
Can I just mention an obvious thing, right? So how do they get the salt out of the sand?
Well, if you look at some of the building, you can see that they haven't altogether got it out. It's got a white crust on the outside of the building.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, that's so bloody obvious. You are right, Pete. Yeah, I've been on. Yeah, I've been on building sites, and you see this white line crusting down the wall because you're right. They haven't
That's
taken
right.
salt out of it. Oh God, we're really getting to the nitty gritty today. So it's that sand layer that we're talking about, half a metre of sand on Barry Island. It did say it in there. I just missed it because I talked too quick. The second deposit varies in thickness from between 1 and 6 meters. It is of relatively recent origin and was discovered by John Story to seal completely the remains of early medieval occupation on the island. So he's talking about the British kitchen, and he's talking about the centre of the island, and he's talking about St. Barrett's Chapel. The distinction between these two layers and their dating is parallel by other evidence along the coast. So this is very important, because what we do see is at this stage there were two islands. At some time in the past, that there was a little island which was Barry Island, and there was the big island which was Sully Island. And what John Story's describing is that you've got this half a metre thick layer, which is sort of spread over bits of Barry Island, and then you've got this 6 metre layer which usually clogs the gap between those two islands that I described, creating one island. There you go. It's there, black and white. There remains only one characteristic feature of Barry to discuss, and this is what we're going to do. The pebble beaches. Now this is going to be interesting. Let's have a look at that, which are the most recent coastal addition. So this is the thing, you see. How recent? And the reason why we're going to say how recent is because what we do find in the construction of the fort at Cardiff, pebbles being used, which have been brought from Barry, right? And stone being used, which has been brought from Barry. but where to in Barry were they brought from? We were not going to answer that question, but it's describing that these pebbles being a most recent coastal addition, and that refers to the blocking up completely of Porthcurry and Coldnap. They are derived from the Lias limestone cliffs at Porthcurry and have travelled eastwards along the coast towards Barry since the 1500s. I say before, but that's something else. The journey of the pebbles has been closely studied and reveals that they move in a characteristic zigzag fashion along the shore. I remember doing this in geography in school. One stone travelling eastward towards Coldnap as much as 30 meters in a single tide. So that's chunky stone moving 30 meters, which is quite a lot, to be honest with you, for a stone.
But because of their shape, they can roll quite easily.
And also the sea spews them out, Peter, as you well know. Fortunately, they are also carried back, which has prevented them from overtopping Coldnap Point. So what we're talking about, they just go, they go back again. But this is that zigzag thing that we're talking about. So it zigzags along the coast. Specially marked beaches have been traced for a number of years in their progress. Some of them remaining buried on the beach, protected from abrasion for as long as 8 years before re-emerging. This eastward drift of sand and pebbles has altered the character and use of the Barry coast. In the absence of the pebbles, the beach at Glan-y-Mor and the marshy estuary on the site of the lake were put to other use by the Romans at Barry, and we know what that was. But that disagrees with what has already been said. And what that disagrees with, we're saying that these pebbles seem to emerge about the 1500s, but then it's saying that there were pebbles about in the Roman period, and then they are ending up being traded and taken to Cardiff to build a fort and various other things. And one thing that's not made clear in this book is what exactly Gerald Baudet means. And we're going to explain that now. It's very likely, and we've said this and we've described this ourselves, that at Porthcurry, the point at Porthcurry, the bulwarks point, not the bull's nose, but the bulwarks point that overlooks Porthcurry, was holding back billions of tons of these pebbles. And when that area between Castle Rock and the cliff had been breached, those pebbles then plugged Porthcurry and then plugged the likes of Coldnap, and that would have happened over a few generations. And this basically explains this. So the Romans are actually getting their pebbles beyond Porthcurry Point, right? And we'll call it Porthcurry Point because that's what it was back then, beyond Porthcurry Point, after, say, the great storms of the 15 and 1600s. Don't remind us the dates, Peter. 1583, not the 1606 one, and the 1606 one. But what we're talking about, that explains that those two paragraphs. The reason why we've got pebbles beyond Porthcurry going to Cardiff, and then later on after the 1500s, we've got pebbles going from that landscape, and so on.
When we take the build-up of water from the rivers flowing into the Severn Estuary, as they're flowing in, when the tide is coming in, the actual current is much less. But when all that water then decides to leave for the ebb tide, and that's when you get the very, very high currents and the movement of all these materials.
Exactly. So all this sort of coastal change is going on continually. So we've got one last bit now, and then we're gonna call it a day. So and obviously we will be back next week naturally, and then I want to ask when we're going to be doing the live stuff again. I would like to know when that will be. And I'm just gonna so we've got a bit of a conclusion here, and I'm fiddling about with something here, and we're just doing that, and we're just doing one other thing. Bear with me a second. Right, good. Excellent. Go. Right, so in conclusion of everything that we've done since page 22 all the way to page 28 is follows. Barry's geological history is remarkable for its simplicity. I would agree. So few processes have been at work in creating our landscape: elevation and subsidence, erosion and deposition by wind and water. Almost alone, these have been responsible. Their actions across an autumn time span have been relentless. Much of the geological record is missing. That which remains lends itself equally to complex and detailed study and to a more general understanding, which we've probably done both. The succession of coastlines, valleys, and estuaries, though completely different from those of the present, cannot be regarded as unrelated, and in some instances have repeated themselves after millions of years. Each stage was influenced by what came before, and in its turn influenced what came after. The evolution of the Bristol Channel through all its phases being a prime example. We should also do well to remember that our present familiar landscape is but a temporary feature on the surface of the earth. It's quite daunting. The forces of wind and water are at work around us all the time. Elevation and subsidence, sudden or slow, may recommence. All about us will alter, and we shall take our place in the strata of geology. Pete will be part of the geology of the world as well. Man has contributed almost nothing so far to this story. The passage of millions of years has been described in these introductory pages. The period since as a rival covers only thousands of years, but requires the rest of the book.
The problems is very little was actually written pre-Roman.
Yes.
And anything that had been, the Romans would tend to remove it and replace it with their own writings. So we haven't got much written pre-Roman.
Or if there was any substantial writing at all, Peter.
Well, well, we don't know.
Exactly, we don't know. Exactly, that's the point. We don't know on that. We don't know. We don't know. So oh right, we've got a raffle today, right? And you know, Pete's gonna put £1 in for Kathy, and Ruth. Kate can put £1 in for
Ruthie.
Ruthie, and I'll put £1 in for Pauline. So there you go. Oh no, I haven't got £1 for Pauline. Anyway, I don't think she likes me anymore because I haven't spoken to her for weeks.
I have a prize here.
Before you jump into the prize, right? What we're going to do is we're going to find out if there are any questions. Any questions from you, Kate?
I think it was just an observation. The pardon me, the peat, the clay. That's what made me think of Sully Moore's, wondering what's there, because that must have nice delineated layers as well, because the flooding, for instance.
I think it does, but I've got to answer that question quite directly. Nobody's really ever researched that area properly at all. Nobody's ever really, from what I know, it's not really been studied, except there was a chap that used to come to the class in Barry a few years ago before the that COVID nonsense, called Paul, who had done a little bit of research, who had gone along with the chap who had done a little bit of research on some of the coring of the moor, but I don't know anything more than that. But actual studying, looking at that moor, it's not really been done. There was a big archaeological excavation at Biglis, which is obviously on the eastern edge of Barry, just beyond, opposite McDonald's, actually. That was research, but they didn't really go into the muds and silts. And for me, that would complete the picture, because we know, well, actually, Richard will know I go on about this. The opportunity to really understand the layers at Porthcurry was lost in the beginning of the 1990s, and some numpty in the room didn't have the confidence to go and look at it, but I was only like 15. But we've got a little bit more information at Cold Nap. We've got a lot of information at the sound between Barry and Barry Island, but that area hasn't really been studied, and it's about time that it
I
was.
don't know why, but it fascinates me every time I drive through it.
And it fascinates me every time you go through on the train, and it's like there's a lagoon on the north and the south, and you think that the train's going to be swallowed up by water any moment. Yeah, I know. It's quite shocking that it really, really is. It's like if you can imagine visitors to the area for the first time on a massive stormy swell, and the landscape is full of water. It is scary. It's like the train is going through puddles of water. It's right. Anything else you want to say, Kate, before we finish with you?
I don't think so. I don't
We're
think so.
We're going to do the Kate's raffle, but unfortunately nobody can see the raffle prize. It's a bloody good job as well, because Pete don't want it. Anyway, he does. Kate has gone out of her way to find you a raffle prize you won't like this week. So, Pete, anything you'd like to say?
This is a special New Year's
Shut up! You can't tell us
raffle
yet.
prize.
Keep talking. Shut up.
I didn't say what it was. I just said it's a special for the new year.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Pete, anything you want to? What it is?
No.
It's too.
Not that I haven't already added.
Okay. What I wanted to say, Pete, is it's 4 tickets to go to the Plough and Harrow, for you and Sandra. Yeah. And I'll take it'll be me and my daughter Beth, and we'll she could do some singing by the fire.
But on that time, at that Christmas dinner, when we all went to the Plough and Harrow, Sandra was in the breast clinic in Landoch, and my daughter told her daughter, my father's taking her to dinner tonight, don't you?
Oh, I'm having a big date.
Yeah, and her daughter didn't know, of course.
I'll tell you what, you get yourself into trouble, Pete.
Yep.
Richard, what about you, darling?
Not a lot to put in, I think. I think some of the stuff, there were stone hand axes and things found.
Yeah.
And I think Lord Windsor ended up having all those.
And we never saw the light of day again.
Yeah. Possibly ended up in Friars Point House.
Under the floor somewhere. There might even be a cabinet over there or something. I don't know. Don't know if they ended up in the museum or what.
But someone had put some pictures on of. Did you see the ones on Facebook of the interior?
I didn't.
Of Friars Point House, 1910.
I didn't see them. I didn't see them, Richard. Anyway, Richard, you're joining us tonight as well. I do believe so. Yeah. At 6 o'clock. So we'll be doing that tonight. It'll be slightly different tonight, but we won't go into why. And anything you want to say, Peter, as well?
Oh.
Okay. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to say that thanks, guys, for getting your shekels over. Kate, don't forget to put some money over my way.
No probs.
And now we're going to have the raffle. So official raffle. What is the prize? Pete, don't go yet, Pete. What's the prize, Kate?
Do you want me to reveal it?
Well, you've got to reveal it. Otherwise, you won't get any money out of Pete.
It's the 2023 wall calendar.
What? Oh, wow.
It's a 2023 wall calendar. It's a practical gift.
Oh, well, Pete wants that for the Flat Home
Society. To write on it. Space to write on it.
Well, Pete wants that for the Flat Home Society, so he's in for this. Right, good. All right, then. Okay. So, let's just, Pete, smile, look with a bit of gratitude on your face, right? Pete's number 1, Richard number 2, right? Kate's number 3, Ruth is number 4, and Kathy's number 5, right? So here we go. We're gonna get the the thingy for the raffle prize, right? And oh, somebody's saying enlightened turtle. Hello, nice to see you guys doing this kind of work, right? And if
Turtle.
anyone online wants to do the raffle, they've got to say now, this second. There's nobody online want to do the raffle, but you know that's life. Right. So anyway, so here we go. We're gonna get the numerator thingamajig, and we're gonna do that. And we're going to hang on a minute. Why can't you know when you're trying to find something you can't find it, Ruth? What Ruth? I can't even get your name right. It's 1 to 5, right? So there we go. There it is. So when I press the button, right, we will know. Richard is so wanting this wall calendar. He wants it. There you go. Number 4. Richard, you won the wall calendar.
I was number 2. No, I don't know.
Oh, hang on a
That's
minute.
that's two
No,
wins in a row, didn't you?
Stop. I've got R2 and R4. So R2 was Richard, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, Ruth has won the wall calendar.
Oh, cool. She won last time too. You guys both won cards, didn't you? Yes, I've still got them for you. No getting away from it.
Fair enough. Oh, and somebody said ancient Historia. I wouldn't want to take the prize from one of you guys. Well, they've just
But
commented.
they don't. You don't know the worst of it, or rather the best of it. What kind of calendar is it?
Oh God, tell us what the calendar is.
It's Daniel O'Donnell,
Oh,
the Irish singer, with a big photograph of him for every month.
oh dear.
Looking a bit like a. Anyway, it's gorgeous. It's
That's gorgeous.
something we. Well, it's something we do. We call it ironic calendars, and we plague one another with
Very
it.
ironic is right.
Well, a parade
Well, I
went,
didn't
didn't
win
it?
it.
And we've ended up as your prize because 2 recipients refused it.
I don't blame them.
My son was pleased with his Pope, though. I gave him a Pope calendar. He thought that was good.
Do you know what I'm thinking of doing? I've just a final thing. I've always thought of doing a promotional line of Pope on the rope. Right, so you have on a rope, right? You have an image of each of the popes throughout the ages, right? You have a complete set of popes, and what you do when you're in the shower, right? You wash your body with an image of the Pope. You know, he gets to all your nether regions, and I thought that would be quite an interesting thing to do. Don't worry, Richard. I'll send you one over for Pauline. Have I upset Pauline or something, Richard?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, right. Anyway, give
I'm
her
very
mine.
impressed with your singing, mind, the other day.
She was very impressed.
Wasn't very impressed.
All right. Okay. All right. We yeah. Well, that explains a lot, then, doesn't it? Right. Okay. Then what we're going to do? We're going to call it a day. So we will be back next week. Oh, the other thing as well is, when do we want to go back live again? When are you going to be fit and well enough to do live again, Peter? In
I don't
February?
know. I could have this thing permanently, so I may well say never.
Oh no!
Oh yeah.
Not even to the pub. Not even to the pub.
Not even what?
Not even to the pub. If we met in the pub, would you come to the pub?
To the pub? No.
Oh.
No. Well,
possible.
What we'll do, we'll give Peter a bit of time and see how he is in the next month or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be good. That'll be good.
Yeah,
On
he's
that
gonna wait till the weather warms up anyway.
Exactly. Oh,
It's
by
not
the way,
very warm down there.
I have been painting the studio, and it's starting to get there, so it's looking good. Kate, I need somebody
It's a
to
bit
sort of.
hard on poor Richard to get down there in the poor weather too.
Oh, who cares
A bit
about
wet.
Richard? He's got his special mobile, hasn't he? You just go down there. Okay. On that note, what's that, Rich?
Oh, I can say anything.
All right, then. On that note, what we'll do, we'll be meeting back up 11:30 next week, and anyone wants to join us online next week, we'll do a bit more from the Barry book next week, because I thought this was interesting today. Well, it's always interesting.
Yeah.
But I felt what we
I'll go
did.
dig.
Would it be better if we could have followed it from the book?
Right.
I'll dig it out. I'll dig mine out.
Right.
I'll try and get hold of a
Excellent.
copy.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be useful, and follow it. Actually, what I could do is if after this now I take a load of photographs of what we're going to do next week, right? And I'll bang it over on email.
Okay.
Yeah, that you have the gang has spoken, so that's what we're going to do.
Yay!
So what we will be doing next week is from the Barry book. We'll be doing before Barry began, the Paleolithic period, and then it's basically that'll take us through to, I think we'll do. Oh God, there's quite a bit here. We won't go to the Roman bit. We'll just do. Yeah, if I can photograph these and get them over to you, and you can have a look. And some enlightened turtle says, "Get well soon, Peter."
Thank you.
They obviously don't know you.
Yay!
They obviously know you, Pete. So that's good. So, all right then. I think enlightened turtle might actually be somebody from Barry, so they might know you, Pete.
It may well do. Yeah.
They might do. So what we're going to do, we're going to finish now. And thanks for joining us today. And we'll see you all next week, 11:30. Oh, and Kate, have you managed to get that book out yet?
It's all packaged up and addressed. I just have to get to the post office this afternoon. No
And
problems.
make sure you grab. Thank you for that, Kate. And make sure you grab a copy of Romans in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Okie dokie. Thanks, honey.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Kate. So what we're going to do is Richard, Peter, and Kate. I will see you all next Wednesday. Thanks for everybody's endeavours. And Richard, I will see you tonight.
Okie doke.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for
Take
joining
care,
us. Take care.
everyone.
Cheers, Dan.
Take care.
Go on.
And thanks
Nice
everybody
to
online
see
as
you
well.
all.
Nice to see you. Take care. To see you. Nice.
Bye.
Nice to see you. To see you. Nice. See you, Kate. Thanks for everything. Bye. Bye.
Cheers, you too, honey.
Bye. Bye. Lovely. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody. Yeah. Take care, dudes, as well. Thank you very much online. That was a nice little one, and yes, so if anyone online wants to follow this next week 11:30 and they want an email of what we're doing online, and they want a copy of this email I'm going to send out, if you send an email to me now, right, if you send an email to me now, then what I will do is I will sort of bang you in with this sort of posting that we're going to do next week, so you can follow what we're going to be doing from the Barry book next week, and it could be a bit of fun for you. So that's what we're going to do. So okay, I'm gonna finish now. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I haven't mentioned it at all. And thank you guys. Thank you guys, everybody who joined us. And do you know what, right? I know that there's been about 3 people watching this now, and it's only showing 2 watching. There's obviously something wrong with the counter. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, email me your email so I can get these notes. I'm off. I'm going. I need a cup of tea and I got to feed the animals. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for your support. And my friend Luke, thank you for your comments. So it's really appreciated. Right, I'm off. 1, 2, 3. I'll go check the chat. Close meeting, but everybody. Right. Nothing in the chat. Right. Oh, hang on. Chat. Nothing. Good. Okay. And finally, I'm off. Thank you.